What's your take on this?
I mean, it's gets the backdrop of a lot of volatility, but I definitely think that the billings miss that you mentioned is important, right? And I think what happens is we're a pretty young company in the grand scheme of life, 6.5 years old. We've had 4 quarters as a public company, so we're kind of coming into our sophomore year. And there's, rightfully, I think, probably a lens of skepticism on whether this growth is durable and all of that. But what happened this quarter is a little different. We had the global pandemic, the 30% annualized GDP contraction, and the record unemployment. We added 8,000 net new paid customers in the quarter, which was fantastic, and we can talk about that more. But that brings the total to 130,000. If you think about 130,000 businesses, there's going to be a large number of small and medium businesses. They're all around the world, and they much more accurately reflect the broad economic condition. So when those companies freeze hiring, when those companies do layoffs, that it shows up in our billings number more or less instantaneously. On the other hand, the positive effects take a lot longer to materialize. So I think what you'll see happen over the next couple quarters, the next year, the next couple years, we will continue to build credibility with investors and in the market. We're very confident that this growth is durable, and that the future that we're building is one that it has a lot more opportunity than the one that we're leaving. So a little bit long answer. I apologize, but I think it's important context.
No, I appreciate you sharing that context. For the second quarter in a row, speaking of the backdrop and talking about the future, you haven't provided a billings forecast because of the uncertainty ahead. Just what don't you know about the future? How much volatility do you see coming forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, things are getting a little bit clearer now. I think there's still probably, I think we're going to be in the situation longer than people anticipate still, and there might be some thinking that's stuck, believing that we're going to be back in offices really soon. But from the perspective of Slack as a business, I think it really doesn't matter, because the changes that people have encountered, now that people have for 6 months not had to commute, now that people for 6 months have had the flexibility and kind of all the benefits of working from home or working in a distributed fashion, and I apply this to us as well, their imagination has been opened. And of course, they got to acknowledge that this is not it's not normal life. People can't go out and sit in the cafe on the weekend and watch people go by or get their nails done or any of the kind of amenities of life that they're used to. Nevertheless, I think we've all proved to ourselves that, we actually could start working from home in a week's notice and continue operations. So that signals a real shift, and that's long-term, that's structural, and that's something that has provided a lot of the growth in our new customer ads. And that's the fundamental driver of the whole business. So up 60% year on year. And I'm excited about that, but I'm even more excited that a lot of that was driven by what we were doing, improvements in the new product, in the new user experience for people who are creating teams for the first time, and especially Slack Connect. But a portion of that is just increasing the relevance and importance of the category. And those customers are going to grow with us and expand and become like kind of the driving force of the business over the next couple of years.
Now, you've been very supportive of working from home. You've said Slack employees can work from home indefinitely. On the other hand, I just interviewed Reed Hastings, the co-CEO of Netflix, who, if he has anything to say about it, Netflix employees are going to come back to the office, as soon as they can. And he thinks the pandemic, he used the words, it's going to be just a little blip in history. What's your reaction to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's probably right in history. And he's a pretty smart guy. So, maybe there's something I'm not getting here. But what we've seen is a real change in the market dynamic and the kind of game theory in the competition for employees. So we compete with Netflix for employees. We compete with Twitter for employees. And that's, for the last couple of decades, been a pretty intense part of the competitive struggle in the technology world. A lot of people have decided they want to move back closer to family, or they don't want to live in a small apartment anymore, or if they don't have to commute, maybe they're going to live a little further out and have a bigger house that has a yard. And those are like real life decisions that people are making. People are really moving, and companies are really hiring remote workers. that's not easy to undo, because if you see 30% of your staff, 40% of your staff, 50% of your staff begin to make choices that are going to make it hard for them to come back and work in the office, it's a little bit of a one-way door unless you're willing to let go of all those people. And that in many cases, that is the company. And I think organizations who insist that people come back into the office are going to be at a real competitive disadvantage for talent. So we last week launched a new organization that eventually will have a life of its own, but we're incubating it, called Future Forum. And the mission is to reimagine management. And we've done some research there. 12% of employees say that they expect to be in the office all the time at some point in the future. There's a chunk that want to work remotely permanently. There's a much, much bigger population, though, that thinks, a day or two a week in the office and the brutal commute, but several days a week at home. Maybe we get together every other week for several days to brainstorm and plan and generate work. But when we're all just sitting at our computers working, we don't need to be in the office. The cascade of changes from that, to commercial real estate, to the way offices are set up, to business travel, all of that, I think has yet to be worked out. And I think it's going to be tough to stand against the current there and still be able to attract and retain talent and even keep the people that you have.
You filed an antitrust complaint against Microsoft with the European Commission, and you've warned that Microsoft could retaliate against Slack. How much of a competitive threat is Microsoft? And I'm curious if their posture has changed at all behind the scenes since that complaint was filed. Like, are they softer and friendlier than they are on the surface?
No change. And it's hard to quantify. I mean, the important thing for us, and I think probably for them too, is the market is so big that we're not going to, they're not going to be a limiting factor on our ultimate success in the short term anyway. It absolutely does insert some friction in the buying process. There's a very deliberate creation of the good old fashioned FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. On the other hand, our win rates are unchanged through this period. We've consistently won in customers who use Office 365. We've consistently won in environments where Teams and Slack go head to head. But the much more common case is Teams and Slack are used alongside one another because Teams is a video conferencing app, just like Zoom. And Zoom is the one that we happen to use. But it doesn't do the same thing as Slack, and so they're not really replacements. So, would my life be easier, and would our head of sales life be easier if Microsoft somehow cease to exist? Absolutely. But 49% revenue growth from last year and acceleration in the rate of new customer acquisition, I think demonstrates that we're doing okay anyway.
We're less than 2 months away from the election. TikTok has become a lightning rod in U.S.-China relations. Microsoft obviously pursuing TikTok. If President Trump stays in office, what does that mean for business in Silicon Valley? And what about the flip side? What if Biden wins?
Yeah, this is not like a generic, I don't deal in hypotheticals. It's actually very hard to kind of compute what the reactions will be and what the ramifications. I think if Trump wins, we're going to get like extra Trump because he'll have been emboldened. And this is, unless things really change, this will be his last term. And so he doesn't have anything to lose anymore. And we'll just get like a lot more of what we're getting. Biden, I think, is going to be concerned with a real return to normalcy. As a operator of a business, I kind of prefer the second path there. And as an individual citizen, I also obviously do as well. But I'm feeling pretty confident that this is not going to be a disaster. But because the magnitude of the impact of things going wrong, of like an election that doesn't work, is so high, it is something to still be concerned about.
Now, looking forward, you made a partnership with AWS on video conferencing. Curious what the white spaces are or adjacents you see or would like to build out that customers are asking for. I wonder about schools with the rise in remote learning. Are more schools? Is education going to be a bigger sector on Slack? Quickly, sort of what are some future product areas that you're looking to explore?
Great. I will do this quickly. So the big one for us right now is called Slack Connect, and it allows two or more Slack using organizations to create channels that are shared across the organizational boundaries that may or may not sound impressive if you don't already use a product. But if you do, I think you get this is a real improvement in your ability to collaborate and communicate with partners. And a lot of the people you deal with at work are vendors, suppliers, customers, professional services firms. It's like the whole web of relationships you have with other businesses. It's a big improvement in that collaboration and communication, but it's also a huge step forward for security and compliance because it's replacing a lot of communication that happened out of band. So very attractive proposition for enterprise.
Okay.
I'll try to be quick, but just one more. The challenge that we have as managers today, I think, is and individual employees as well, is trying to figure out how processes that today must be synchronous. In other words, everyone has to stop what they're doing and then attend the meeting at the same time. How many of those could be replaced with asynchronous processes? How much of what we see in the consumer world with Snapchat and Instagram stories and all of that, how much of that could make its way into the enterprise and kind of take the burden off of the perpetual video conferencing?